when you share an office with Rob, it's dangerous what you end up doing. Um, yeah, it's a real privilege to be here and listening to some of what we've been thinking about and just thinking a little bit about what I'm involved in. Leadership, I mean, we've talked about it already. It's one of those topics that's never far from our lips. It's never far from the news, whether it's Trapattoni and his decisions, whether it's the falling confidence in our political leaders. We all have an opinion, and we all like to make our opinions heard. And I think it's fair to say in Ireland at the moment, and it's already been alluded to, that we've lost faith in a lot of our leaders, whether that's in the church, whether that's in politics, and whether it's in business. We've seen too many leaders that are more concerned with their own power and lining their own pockets than they are with those that they're supposed to lead. And we've also got one of the youngest populations in Europe. I think something like 35% of our population is under 25. And if I've got my figures right, I think we have the largest percentage of under 14s in the whole of Europe. And when Oz was talking about under 35s, I just about qualify in by about 2 months. But I think we're a generation that has lost faith in a lot of our leaders. We've lost faith in the hierarchical structures that we've seen in society. And we're also a generation that find it easy to have an opinion, a generation that find it easy to point out what is wrong and what's gone wrong. A couple of months ago, I was chatting to an 18-year-old girl who lives in the flats near where we live. And she said something when we were chatting about community and we were chatting about change that's really burned in my memory. And she said, "What's the point? Nothing around here is ever going to change." And that's why Innovista exists. That's why I'm here. I want to be part of breaking that cycle of hopelessness. I want people to be able to not just dream of a better future, but experience leaders who are about service instead of power. And that's what Innovista is about. Innovista is about working to equip young leaders to bring hope to their communities. And now when I say leaders, I don't mean church leaders. And I think that's one of the things that in a Christian context or in a church context, we always start thinking leader automatically means someone who's leading in their church. But I mean leaders, people like Neve, I think is a really great example of just one of those people who are leading, who are influencing, who are bringing those stories and who are affecting change. And as 20s and 30s here in Ireland in 2012, yes, we live in difficult times. Yes, jobs are a struggle. Yes, lots of people are moving away, but the picture isn't as bleak as is sometimes painted, or as the media sometimes paints. I think they paint a bleaker picture of what my generation thinks about faith and how my generation are involved in following Jesus and living that out. All around Ireland, there are young Christian leaders who believe that we're called to seek the good of the cities, the towns, the villages in which we live, who believe in a God who's into bringing hope and healing and restoration, who aren't perfect and who know that they've got a lot to learn, who want to serve the communities of which they're a part, whether that be their neighbourhood, their workplace, whether it be a circle of social circles, whether it be the towns, the cities that we live in, who want to lead in a way that empowers and releases others. But they need help, they need courage, they need to be encouraged, they need support and training, they need to be invited to dream, to pull back the curtain and see what could be. And I love this picture, I think it's by Banksy, but just that, it communicates more, there's no point in me trying to explain it. But that sense of pulling something back and giving a window into a future that is full of hope, and that there is hope and there is a different future that is possible. Young leaders in their 20s and 30s and younger need to engage with others of like minds who are also committed to being people who bring and give hope. And that's what we're seeking to do in Innovista, to equip these young leaders in their 20s and 30s with the character, with the skills, with the connections, so that they can bring positive change and lasting hope to their communities. Now, I don't have a formula when it comes to developing leaders. If I did, I'd probably be really rich and have written lots of books. But I don't think there is a formula. I don't think there's an equation. And we've touched on this already. It's complex, it's contextual. But I want to share just a little tiny bit about what I've learned and some of the stories of some young leaders that I've come across in that journey. And I guess one of the things that I've realized is that we kind of need to start with the end in mind. the issues that we need to tackle and the people that we want to serve are complex. They're a combination of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs. And to deal with these issues and to deal with people holistically, we need holistic leaders. And to develop holistic leaders, we need holistic processes, if that doesn't get confusing. But do you know what I mean by that? We need to start with what we're trying to do. And I think, for me, clarity on the end that we're trying to reach helps us to work on the how. And remembering that any attempt at a one-size-fits-all approach is doomed to failure. So the methods that we use to try and develop leaders need to be tailored to people's context, to their learning styles, to all of those sorts of things. If they're to work, for example, if we want to be leaders who listen and who are good at listening, we need to learn and practice how to listen, but we also need to experience the benefit of being listened to. And I think that's just a tiny little example of some of what we're about. And we're trying to work this out in Tempo, which is a leadership development experience that we provide for 20s and 30s who are involved in leadership teams and leadership roles. It offers a group of leaders from different places the opportunity to journey together over the course of a year and to work through a number of different things, like what the mission of God looks like in their context, in the place where they live, how to discern and communicate vision, like following on from what Oz was saying about learning to listen to the leading of the Spirit. Discerning vision. Vision's not just something that comes from me, but being able to discern what is it that God is trying to do in this place, what does his kingdom look like in that place, how to make that a reality, how to build teams, how to develop character, and intentionally how to develop other people who are younger, the next generation coming up. And I guess as part of that, we found a number of things that experiential learning is a big part of what we're trying to do. It's crucial to be able to actually do things in practice. We've found that visits to projects where people can see this in action, it's been some of the most effective things that we've done and the real highlights of people's experiences. We add in bits of reading to do, we add in listening, we get people to experiment with what they're learning and to really put it into practice, and then to come back and to feed back, and for the rest of us to feed back to them on what they're saying and their experiences. And we combine it with some mentoring and coaching because we're trying to provide a rounded learning experience. Because just going to a training session isn't enough. Just going to a training session, how many of us have been to a training session and forgotten everything 3 days later? But we're trying to create a learning experience that is rounded and that will form and help be part of the process of forming the leaders that we need. It means that we explore not just the theory, but also the practice and the confidence, skills and character, trying to build that tension of, as Jacob would say at IBI, keeping the head, heart, and hands connected. And some of those young leaders who are bringing hope to their communities are people like Ashley. Ashley's someone who didn't have one of her parents around when she was growing up, and she benefited from others who invested in her, who were older and wiser, and who took time out and took her under their wing. She's passionate about seeing teenagers in similar scenarios experience the benefit of being invested in, experience the benefit of being believed in, and given hope and given confidence. And from having a dream that she wasn't quite sure how to articulate and what to do about, at the beginning of her year in Tempo, she went to set up a mentoring program in her community for teenagers who, like her, didn't have one or both parents around when they were growing up. And she's now moved to Dublin. It's always good to snap up the good ones. She's now moved to Dublin and is working with me to develop a leadership program for teenagers in schools. Another one of those leaders is a guy called Reggie. And as a result of being asked to look at the context in which we live and work, he looked around at the people in his community and set up a meal and a movie evening for immigrants who'd moved to the city and lived near him. And also built relationships with the local council and with local youth workers to set up a drop-in youth club for the kids in the area who were on the streets and who didn't have much to do. But the thing that really impressed me about him was that he was there in that place for a year or two, and recognizing that he was only there in the short term, he built a team, which meant that the things that he started are still going, and he involved other people. And that, for someone who was 21, I don't think I would have realized that at 21, was incredible. Another girl, Karen, on realizing the importance of of asking the right questions and actually listening to people in the community has led to the community project that she's involved in changing some of the programs that they do and now involving the people in their local community in how they deliver the program and how they consult about it. There are lots of young leaders across Ireland that I could tell you stories about who are working in the inner city, who are mentoring young people, all sorts of things. Teachers who are helping their pupils deal with stress and eating disorders. There are so many, and there are lots in this room. And they're all young leaders who haven't arrived, but yet are passionate about serving their communities and bringing the hope of Jesus to those places and to those people. So I guess that's the first thing I've kind of learned about starting with the end in mind. And the second one is that collaboration is vital. And I think Oz kind of hinted at the stuff with networks. Recognizing that leadership isn't about a one-man band or forging a lonely furrow, and that leaders develop best in community is why Tempo is a group process that we use, and wider than that, than those groups of 6 or 7 people. And we've also started what we call a leadership collaborative in Dublin, which is meeting every quarter, and some of you are part of that and have been involved in that. Bringing together about 20 young leaders at a time from the public sector, from the private sector, from charities, from churches, to learn and explore issues together, but in a small enough group that will create relationships that will actually stimulate collaboration. Because it's not just about bringing a bunch of people together to have a talk shop, but it's about coming together to explore those issues and develop relationships that means that they'll start to work together and work together on those issues, so that you've got people who are working in similar fields and areas who then get to meet and go, actually, we can do this together. And we encourage collaboration because we work best in community, and change is more likely to happen when we work together. And we collaborate because we're about building the kingdom of God and not the kingdom of our own organizations. And that's reflected in some of the ways that we're trying to work in terms of just building up young leaders and equipping them. And I guess the last thing is about starting young. Our focus is about developing leaders in their 20s and 30s, but I'm starting to realize that actually we might need to start younger. Inspired by a project I saw in England, inspired by some of the stuff that DCM are doing with 12 and 13-year-olds, and inspired by The Wire. For those of you who've seen The Wire, this is one of those scenes where they're trying to work on an intervention amongst the kids who are involved in drugs, and they realize that they need to start way before they become corner boys. They need to start much younger. So we're beginning to look at how we can use a community project and teaching to develop leadership skills in teenagers in schools, and who we can partner with that. Piloting some of the material has been incredible, to watch teenagers dream about building a better future, to watch teenagers dream about a different future for their communities. And that's an exciting journey that we're on. And I believe, as one of those people who's about to hit 35, it's kind of been a little wake-up call for me. I'm having this mid-30s crisis. But I believe that it's time for me and for my generation to stand up and to be counted, to begin to be the leaders of integrity that our society so desperately needs, to relentlessly give courage to people, to pull back the curtain and allow hope to shine where there is brokenness, where there is helplessness, where there is hopelessness. We're continually learning as we walk along this road. There are challenges and difficulties all around us today in Ireland, but there are lots of young leaders who are bringing hope to their communities, people like Neve and lots of others, some of the stories I've told you. And I guess at Innovista, we exist to equip them in any way that we can. Thanks.